I want to ask a question, but I worry about offending because I don't have a lot of experience understanding eating disorders. So I'll ask this, and if it's like, oh gosh, Sharon, that's stupid, feel free to correct me.
Okay.
During that time, was there something that somebody could have said that you would have been open to hearing? Welcome to Rising to Resilience, the podcast where we explore real stories of authentic struggle, strength, and ultimately hope and transformation. I'm Sharon Hugick, and I am convinced that resilience isn't just about bouncing back and white-knuckling it. It's about who we become in the process of going through really hard things. Each week, we'll be exploring conversations with people who have faced devastatingly hard heartbreak, loss, unexpected challenges. Yet, even through that pain, they've discovered new strength, they've found purpose, and somehow even joy on the other side. If you are in the middle of a storm right now, or if you're just looking for hope and encouragement for the journey, this is a really good place. Here, my hope is that you'll find perspective and resources and practical tools, but also give you something to cling to, because hope is what it's all about. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Parker, you're my first guest who's bringing a co-host with you, which is pretty exciting. Parker has her daughter with her this morning, so we may get to have a few baby babbles in the background. And seeing how we're all women and most of the people listening to this are probably moms, it might just kind of sound really cute to everybody else but you, right? But Parker, I'm excited to have our conversation today. As we get started, can you introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about your life today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm grateful to be here and so thankful for being able to have this opportunity. So about my life today, I am a mama of two. I have a 2 and 7 month old and a 7 month older. And I work full time at a medical distribution company. So grateful to be able to work from home and also just try my best to juggle it all. It is beautiful and chaotic and messy.
And you have a story that's pretty hard and pretty complex. You describe yourself as someone who helps women move from shame to freedom. Can you share why that mission is so personal to you?
So my story has decades of shame, and finally being free of that has allowed me to walk my new purpose of helping others to get through their struggles and their shame and be able to then walk their purpose that God has intended them to live their life.
You've been pretty open about battling an eating disorder for
Yeah, 17 years. So,
17
yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, what did life look like for you in the middle of that struggle?
So I was 14. I was a gymnast. I was a competitive gymnast, and I have a twin sister. And I think it's important to kind of recognize both of those things. I think gymnastics had a big part of it, the comparison that I struggled with. I also grew up in the age where, the 17 magazine showed you eat this, not that, and kind of gave me that dose of diet culture and what to eat if I wanted to look good in a bikini. And I, at the time, was really struggling with gymnastics. My sister had substantially improved, she was really taking off and I wasn't. And I was dealing with a lot of fear. I also had and still do have OCD. And that was, I think, a big factor of some of these issues that I had in gymnastics and some fear. There was a Friday night that we had some family friends over and we had gotten pizza, and I was already kind of thinking there are things that I'm eating that maybe aren't quote unquote healthy. And this family friend had asked a very close person that I really looked up to how my sister and I were doing at gymnastics. And that person mentioned, oh, my twin is doing great. She's starting to get recruited by colleges. It's awesome. She's doing wonderful. And that person would I could see in their face very uncomfortable with how the conversation was going because I was standing right there about to ask permission for more food. And that person said, "Oh, nobody cares about Parker. We're not going to talk about her." And that just really it was the moment in my life that I became anorexic. And I started with the intention of, I'm just going to lose some weight. If I can at least be thinner, then I'll be better. I've struggled with anorexia for probably I think about 5 years. And there were points where it was incredibly dangerous, and there were points where I kind of was just coasting, and just kind of flying under the radar. But I was by no means healthy. I was not doing anything for my body that was helpful.
You mention in the work you're doing now, shame as an important part of what you're trying to help women sort of feel liberated from. How did shame play a role
Yeah. So I,
in that those circumstances?
with anorexia is a very interesting disorder. And I was really young at the time. But I would say more idolization of my body or a certain body type, but shame when people uncovered that I was skipping meals and, pointing out bones. That was where that shame brought out, and it just, it dropped me to my knees. Shame, though, with binge eating disorder and bulimia is crippling because you don't want people to see that. It's very closed doors, whereas anorexia, I think, in a sense is incredibly dangerous. It is so dangerous. And also there's a celebration of a thinner body. And so you kind of I think the shame is less. The danger is great, but the shame around I mean, gosh, the shame around bulimia and binge eating is just debilitating. I mean, I don't know. I look back and I don't know how I functioned. I don't know how I met my husband during that time. I don't know how I ended up getting pregnant. And all the way through when my daughter was born, my pregnancies paused my bulimia, but it came
Mm,
back postpartum. And, teaching your daughter to eat while you're also throwing up in the bathroom, I mean, it's
yeah.
awful.
It it must have I mean, what you're describing, it just sounds like you were feeling hopeless.
Yes, there was no hope.
Can you share what that tension felt like? That like this idea that their freedom wasn't
Yeah.
possible?
So the only way I can really describe it is imagine like a drug addict. And I think most people have at least an understanding. I mean, you see a lot of you see what drug addicts do in their life and maybe how it impacts family members. And there's a lot of conflicting studies that food is addictive. I believe that it is. And the difference between living with an eating disorder and a drug addiction, which I have struggled with. It's been, I think, over a decade. Struggled with substance abuse previously, so I understand truly the comparison between the two. You have to eat 3 times a day at least. And you can get rid of the drugs, get rid of your friends, get rid of the phone numbers, get rid of all of that. Take yourself out of the environment. You cannot take yourself out of eating a meal. And so you are constantly living between this tension of how am I going to react to this meal? Am I going to skip it? Am I going to eat everything in sight? And am I going to throw it up after?
Mm,
Every single couple of hours. It is torture. There's no hope.
mhm,
It truly, when you are in the pits of it, there's absolutely no hope.
mm. During those low and hopeless seasons, were there people that were reaching out to you? Did you feel like people were aware of it?
No one really knew. In college, I think I actually did college gymnastics too for the first year, and they were aware, and it got really bad with them. So there was a professional team that was helping me, and by no means were they helpful. I just don't think that they were truly equipped,
Hmm.
or maybe understood, or really spent the time. And I'll just share a quick story of one of the therapists that I saw in college. And he took out a chart and said, "How tall are you?" And I said, "I'm 5'2". And he said, "How much do you weigh?" And I told him how much I weighed. And he spun this wheel and goes, "Oh, good. So when you're this weight, you'll be cured." And I was like, okay. I don't think it works like that. And that's kind of like the care I was receiving. So it just wasn't helpful.
Yeah. I want to ask a question, but I worry about offending because I don't have a lot of experience understanding eating disorders. So I'll ask this, and if it's like, oh gosh, Sharon, that's stupid, feel free to correct me. Um, During that time, was there something that somebody could have said that you would have been open to hearing?
And that's a great question. And I think everybody may go through it differently. And here's what I've come to the conclusion of. I wish somebody had really taught me about God then, truly. And that's really kind of the mission that I'm on now. If somebody had given me a Bible and said, "Do you know what? Like, even if you don't feel love to your core, Jesus loves you. And did you know that you are beautifully and wonderfully made? And he knew you before you were even in your mother's womb." Like, if somebody had really said that, I so wish and so truly believe that I would have started to say, wow, I was made for a reason, and I don't need to try to get validation about my appearance or self worth through manipulating what I eat and how I treat my body. And, I also feel like we are vessels that are put on this earth to do God's mission. And if we are, or if I am treating my body in a way that doesn't allow me to do the work that God has intended me to do, it's just, it's not in alignment. It's not in alignment of his love and his care for us. And I so wish somebody had just pulled me aside, given me a Bible and discipled me. And nobody did.
Yeah, I'm getting choked up just the idea that your little girl self just needed to hear something to counter the lie that
Yeah.
nobody cared,
Yeah.
because that was what that lie
Mhm.
rooted in your heart, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm crying.
But it's okay, it's okay, and the Bible is my favorite book, and I tell my daughter all the time, "If God has put you here for a purpose, you're beautifully and wonderfully made, no matter what you look like, and you're loved beyond any measure that you can even imagine, and it will be okay."
Yeah. What was the turning point when you realized things had to change
Yeah,
after 17 years?
so, um, when I had my daughter and I struggled again, I was like, "What am I doing?" What I am, this is not how to live life. And at that point, if somebody said, do you believe in God? I would absolutely, yes, of course. But I didn't understand how awesome God was and how amazing he was and how just he is alive and we are here for him, and he is here for us. And so I didn't understand that. I started searching for some answers. And when I had my child, oh my gosh, it was a miracle. Um, and I really had this sense of I needed to thank him. I was like, I have to thank God for what he brought me my daughter, and now two daughters, and my husband, and these blessings in my life that I didn't deserve. And I just felt this pull. I had to read the Bible. And I started reading the Bible through the Bible in a year. And immediately I was like, I have to go to church. And I was still actively struggling with bulimia at the time and also feeling so ashamed. I knew I had to stop. I had to stop. I just couldn't. And it really felt like an addiction. And there was so much shame and so much, like you mentioned earlier, no hope. And I said to my husband, I said, we need to go to church. We need to start going to church for us and for our daughter. And so we started going to the church that he grew up going to. And it was the second week that we were there, and the sermon was on control, giving up control, and living a Christ like life on the days other than just Sunday. And I felt, I don't, it was God. I felt God just hit me in the face with love and compassion, realization. And I walked out of there and I wasn't bulimic anymore. It was a miracle. And not to say that I don't have moments where I die to myself because, I want sugar, extra sugar. I still enjoy sugar. I enjoy all foods, but he has delivered me from that eating disorder and I don't struggle with it anymore.
Wow. I'm really intrigued. So by that transformation, and I'll ask, so you didn't grow up as a church-going family, Christmas and Easter. What was your
Yeah.
spiritual context like?
So this is really interesting because I'm actually standing in the parking lot. My daughter goes to preschool where I grew up going to church, and I say that in quotations because we believed in God. We went to church for holidays, and I have vague memories of going to this church a handful of times. And then gymnastics got in the way. We started gymnastics when we were very young, and a lot of stuff happened on Sundays for gymnastics. And so by the time I was a teenager, about the time that my anorexia started, we no longer went to church and didn't step foot in a church again until it was
Wow.
2023 when I went with my daughter.
What did you imagine God was like then? Like in those teenage years, what was God to you?
So it was almost like I knew there was a God and there was a heaven. And I would pray almost to like a genie that would grant me wishes, and that was it. So, like, if I wanted something, I would pray and I would hope that it would, turn out the way I wanted it. And that was kind of where my faith was. With Christmas and Easter, I understood the stories behind it. And that was really the extent of it. And, I was missing everything. That was it.
Wow. And then something shifted. Can you take us to that moment?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, when my daughter was born, it was, I have got to thank him, and I don't know where those thoughts came from, other than the fact that the Holy Spirit was pulling me towards him and pulling me closer, and starting to become aware that there is so much more to faith and so much more to having a relationship with God other than just praying when you wanted something. And then as it relates to my eating disorder, certainly I prayed for years to just please make me better, please make me better, please make me better. And going to that church, I felt like I had fully committed myself to saying, okay, I want to know this, that I want to know God. I want to be in the closest relationship I can with him. And that second time I came, he delivered me and gave me that miracle of recovery.
Right. So you literally moved from embracing a lie into believing
Yeah.
truth
Yeah.
about a God given identity. And
Yeah.
it
And
was radical. I mean,
yeah, so radical. And I think just the words of, like, you are not in control. God's in control. God's in control of all of this. And with the combination of you have to live like Christ, not just on Sunday going to church for that 1 hour. And so what does that look like? And for me, obviously, throwing up all day long is not living. That's not how Christ wants us to live. That's not our purpose on this earth. And I say this to myself all the time, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. Why would you do that to yourself? You don't.
hmm. What did that recovery begin to look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah.
How did that transformation start?
So I would say practice and perseverance. So one, growing my relationship with God. I had an opportunity to start truly understanding what a relationship with God looks like. What were my spiritual disciplines? What was I doing to grow my relationship with him? And that was only going to help my recovery. And that's still where I stand today. And then practice and perseverance of, practicing at every meal. What does it look like to go through a meal with peace and understanding that I'm not going to, and my last eating disorder was bulimia. So I was not going to go through this meal without awareness of how my body felt. And no matter how much I ate, throwing up was not an option. And that takes a lot of prayer, a lot of humility, a lot of grace. You're not going to get it perfect. And nobody eats perfectly. But that doesn't mean if it's not perfect, you just basically throw it up and start over, which is essentially what I was doing. And so just practicing every day, all day long with plans of, what were my meals going to look like? I at the time my daughter was a little over 1, so she's still in her high chair and starting to really actually enjoy a meal with my daughter and making it fun and sitting down together and being able to enjoy those conversations rather than eating as much as I could in that, 10 minutes and then throw it all up and hope that she didn't see me.
Yeah. Were you being mentored or discipled by another woman who understood? Or were you in therapy? What tools were you bringing into the equation at that point?
So I was in therapy at the time, and I see a Christian therapist now. I was also meeting with a nutritionist to
Mm.
just help me, understand, meal planning, figure out if there are kind of spots in the day that were tough to get through. How could we get through that? But so I would say, community, whatever that community looks like. Um, Sin thrives in isolation. And so even though I don't think my throwing up was a sin, all of the other things that were getting me to that point were a sin. And so being able to parse that out with a therapist and the actual eating habits with a nutritionist were key to sustaining that.
I want to pull up a quote that I found the other day. It kind of resonated with me about shame. The quote is that shame needs silence, secrecy, and isolation to survive.
That's it.
That resonates with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I went all those years with no community that clicked. There was not enough. There was too much silence. And I think now thinking back to it, and still today, when I don't eat perfectly, I'm not going to struggle in silence. And there's not going to be those moments. And why? Because God's right here with me. God, he knows what I'm eating. And, it's convicting and also so strengthening.
Hmm. Have you developed practices or things that you do to fight against that secrecy?
Yeah. So, um, I would say the biggest thing is enjoying those trigger foods as a family. So I love sweets. It was such a trigger food with my eating disorder. So things like we at the beach, my daughter had her first donut and we went as a family and you eat them together and you love them together and then when we're done together, they go back in the cupboard and you don't eat them until the next day. And that's a great thing to do to celebrate those foods. You don't abuse them. You don't use them for comfort. I would say another thing too is recognizing your feelings and asking God, like, what does this mean? What do you want me to do here, God? God, I'm feeling really overwhelmed and I want to be satisfied with food, but help me out here and
Hmm.
have him lead me to what is a better solution here. And that is truly my greatest crutch throughout the day. If I'm feeling like coping with food is the only way I'm gonna feel satisfied, because the truth is we're not satisfied with anything. Um, it's Jesus. And so leaning on him to feel satisfied.
Right. I mean, it's profound to hear how much this new relationship with God has changed you.
I pray. I know there are so many people out there that are going through the same thing that just don't understand that God is in control. And he's in control of my children's lives. He's in control of my life. And with everything going on personally, professionally, in the world today, it's just not up to us. God has a bigger plan.
What's been the biggest surprise for you about life on this side of the struggle?
Gosh, I mean everything, everything. Think every day is just so incredible when you're just blinded by and weighed down by the shame and your day to day, just the ickiness of what I was going through, my eating disorder. It's almost like you have a shield on, and I guess that shield could be what people may call anxiety or depression, or all of the mental health issues that go along with what I was dealing with. But just every day is such a gift, and it's okay if it's not perfect, but it's still a gift from the Lord. Just actually being able to embrace how amazing God is. I 10 years ago, 17 years ago, um I could never have imagined that this would have been the life and the blessings and, the dependency that I would have on God, and I'm so grateful for it.
I would imagine that there are many women listening to this who feel that same emotion of being trapped by shame, even if it's not around food, just that feeling like
Yeah.
shame has trapped them on all sides.
Mhm.
What's the encouragement that you would give to them?
That there is hope. There's hope because there's God, and I know, and I say it all day long, but that's really where the hope lies. It still takes hard work. There are still things that you have to do, and the Holy Spirit will lead you to do those things if you build that relationship with God. So if somebody feels trapped, pray, get a Bible. If you don't have one, your life will change. That's what I always say. And just open your hearts to what God has for you, because he doesn't want you to be trapped. That is not God. Um and it's not to say that life won't be hard, but there's so much hope, and you will find the joy in the hard things. And also, I think when you're feeling trapped, that is the opportunity for God to save you. When life is hard, that is your golden moment to just surrender it all and have God pick you up off the floor and take you into the life that he really has for you.
When you were had that moment of clarity in church, when all of a sudden you heard that truth
Mhm.
against the lie, who was the first person that you reached out to?
Yeah, so I remember going to my therapist, like, it was, like, 3 or 4 days later, and I was like, oh my goodness, I haven't had any episodes of throwing up. Like, I think I might actually have a hold of this. I don't think I really knew or recognized what God had done to me, because at the time too, I was still building my relationship with God. I knew that it wasn't me. I knew there was no way that I could have recovered on my own all of the sudden like that. But I told my therapist, and then I think probably a week later, I was like, oh my God, it's been a week. And then I told my husband, I was like, wow, like, I think I might be okay now. Um, and I know I have so much more of an appreciation now, and so much more of an understanding of what God was doing than I did in the moment.
Yeah, that you can reflect on it and understand the profoundness of that transformation because you've seen its impact on your life.
Yeah.
You mentioned, however, that even though you've had that healing, you're still faced with the daily struggles, the daily choices that you're making to reground yourself in this new understanding, this new truth. Are there any practical tools, resources, disciplines that you're doing that keep you building resilience?
Yeah, so I think it's a mix of spiritual practices and what makes you feel closer to God and community. So I know the spiritual disciplines is maybe the term that is used. I don't like the word spiritual discipline because it makes it feel like something you have to do. I like practices because it's not always going to be perfect, but it is something that will help you grow your relationship. And if you have any sports reference for anybody listening, the intention behind practice is to either be perfect or to get better. So, I simply cannot go a day without reading my Bible and meditating and doing a prayer journal. So I journal, but I don't journal to myself. I journal to God, and it's my conversation with Him and confess anything that I'm working through and asking for further sanctification on. And then also a prayer walk. And so that's usually about 30 minutes. 15 minutes is no phone, nothing. I am simply just saying, I am your servant. Please speak, I'm listening, and to see if he wants to speak anything into my heart. And I've had some profound moments in that time with him. And so that walk is really where I feel so close to God. A hot cup of coffee in a moment to myself, I feel so close to God, and I pray during that time. And all of that doesn't come with sacrifice. I'm obviously a mom of young children. And so that looks like me waking up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and doing that. And sometimes it's rushed and sometimes it's still with a baby in my arms. Um, but those are non negotiables that I have to do to help me in furthering my lasting recovery.
If you could go back and sit with your younger self who was in the throes of that 17-year-long battle, what would Parker today want to say to her?
Yeah, I keep thinking about this now with two girls, and I would give myself a hug, and I would help my younger self understand just the greatness of God. And I can't get that time back, um, of all that time lost, but I do every single day try to take as much as I can in and learn now.
There's this idea of resilience and the struggle having purpose and meaning, and that somehow even beauty comes out of those hard years. Can you say that? Is that something that you recognize?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really do believe all of the suffering that I went through at the end of the day, look what it's brought me. It's brought me my amazing husband, it's brought me my two daughters, and it's most importantly brought me to my deep faith in God. And for that alone, I can thank him for the rest of my life. That if those are the things that he wanted me to go through, then so be it, because it ended me up with the deepest and, forever growing faith in God. And that's all worth it to me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You wouldn't want what you went through for
No,
anybody
I would
else,
never trade it.
but you don't want to trade what you've gained. So the final question I want to ask, which I ask everybody, is knowing what you've been through and hearing your story, at this point, how would you define resilience?
So, from a practical way, I think resilience is your ability to grow stronger or be stronger and kind of have that tough skin, so to speak, based on what you previously went through. And I think from a faith perspective, God puts you in situations to understand that you need him, because in weakness, you being weak and depending on God, he gives you the resilience and that grasp of faith to continue to build your relationship with him. And I think that, to me, it is part of resilience. I receive resilience, but I'm so much more dependent and so much more faithful because of what I was put through.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like the light shines brighter because of the darkness, or the sweet tastes sweeter because
Hmm.
of that bitterness.
Yeah.
The contrast is so much more obvious because of how hard it's been. If somebody is looking for support
Yeah.
in this season, if they're hearing your story and feeling like it resonates with them, is there an opportunity for them to connect with you?
Yeah, definitely. So I have an Instagram and then my website, my blog posts, devotionals, prayer requests, and then some Christian health coaching to take people through just these throes of eating disorders, mental health, and substance abuse into recovery using a Christian framework that he's placed on my heart. So I'm excited to be able to offer that. And I hope that if you're struggling with that, you'll take that opportunity.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be really powerful reaching out to somebody else who would understand exactly where they are and has been there
Absolutely.
herself. It would probably be a little bit easier to
Hmm.
talk to somebody like yourself who's been
Yeah.
there and gets it. And
Yeah.
you wouldn't have to explain to Parker where you're at because you have been there yourself. And that's such a gift to women. And I just hope that if you know somebody, if as you're listening to this, or if you yourself are in that situation, that you see this as a sign that there is hope and that there is an opportunity, and that somehow God is using even these words to say, I care and I care about you, and it's time for those lies to end. So thank you for your willingness to share your story
Yeah.
with other women and reach out to them. Rising to resilience is the fact that these awful, heavy, devastating things that happen in our lives can, in fact, bring about something beautiful, that there can be strength that's taken out of the storm, that there can be healing that comes from the hardship. And it's such a joy for me to be able to talk to other people who have persevered and seen the beauty that comes out of these ashes. And thank you, Parker, for so generously and bravely sharing your story with our audience and with me today. And
Thank you so much.
I'm grateful to hear it.
Yeah. Thank you. Grateful for you.
I found that conversation with Parker to be beautiful and so inspiring and really moving, particularly the significance that her spiritual life and faith have played in her healing journey, her transformation, and the hope that it's given her. And I realize and recognize that not everybody shares that same definition of faith. I, too, am a Christian, yet I also have seen again and again and again so many people who have probably different expressions of their spiritual life, yet seen tremendous value in exercising that component of their humanity. And every time it moves me, just the power it has and the hope it offers. And I encourage you to be open to that, to be curious about that, and to ask the questions. It has brought a tremendous amount of anchoring into my journey and obviously into Parker's. And as always, feel free to subscribe, to leave a review. And if you have a story of resilience that you would like to share with me, or see if it too can be part of this podcast community, feel free to reach out, Sharon at SharonHujic.com, and I'll be glad to send you an episode.